vegetarians are asked, well, where do you get your protein? And I think the correct response is, well, where do you get your fiber? Um, so
You're watching the Wow podcast. I'm Jennifer Robin. This conversation is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Full disclosure is in the description. Today on the show, we have Debra Gertner. She's a plant-based, registered dietitian nutritionist and a USA Triathlon Level 1 certified coach. She helps athletes of all levels build stronger, healthier bodies with plant-forward nutrition that enhances performance, energy, and recovery. Welcome, Debra.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. I'm excited to be here.
I know you had some early health challenges. Would you like to talk about how that shaped your current career path?
Absolutely. Long before I became an athlete, I struggled with GI health. I struggled with being listened to and taken seriously by doctors. And once I finally connected what I was eating with how I felt, I realized, okay, there was education that was lacking. There was advocacy that was lacking. This is something that I could really do with my life. And as I was pursuing becoming a dietitian, there were a few things that happened. So one was I met with a registered dietitian who is also plant-based. And she turned me on to a lot of this research that shows a link between adopting a plant-based diet and preventing, or in some cases, reversing the same chronic conditions that run rampant in my family, including heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Unfortunately, I was the unlucky person that while I was changing my diet and I had become a runner and I was doing all of these things to advance my own health or to optimize my own health, I got thyroid cancer when I was 27. So it really solidified that resolve to learn as much as I could about the body, about how we take care of the body, and how we move forward in a way that we're advocating for ourselves and we're doing everything we can to not just ideally prevent these chronic conditions, but feel good even in the face of these diagnoses.
Now, how hard was it for you personally to adjust to this plant-based diet? I'm assuming you were a meat eater prior to that.
Yeah, I was the omnivore that echoed all of the common things we hear as plant-based folks of like, but where do you get your protein? And didn't we evolve to eat meat and all of these things? But it's funny because right out of college, I was so broke. And I was the one in charge of cooking meals. I was living with my then husband. And it was, okay, how do I cook tasty meals? And how do I buy food that keeps us within this budget? And really, that was that initial draw of like, oh, rice and beans is actually cheap to make. And we can make it really tasty. And I can save money by us going vegetarian. And in college, I had done a lot of vegetarian cooking with friend groups. And so it was something that I was already relatively familiar with. And I had gone dairy-free when I was like 19, just severe lactose intolerance didn't make my body feel good. So I was already doing a lot that was like vegan adjacent or plant-based adjacent. And so when I made that choice to really shift away from animal products and toward this plant-based lifestyle, it wasn't as difficult for me because there was so much that I was already doing. It became this conscious choice. And this was 16 years ago now. I decided, you know what? I'm not buying any more animal products. And I'm going to dive in with both feet and really embrace this because I think that this is the best choice for me and my health.
You mentioned giving up dairy. I feel like that's becoming, like I'm hearing that everywhere, that people are suddenly finding that they're intolerant to dairy or that it just makes them, have a stomach ache or not feel good or whatever. And I don't remember that, like growing up and even in my early 20s, I don't remember it being an issue. Do you have any idea why so many people now seem to be so sensitive to dairy?
Yeah. So I have a few different thoughts. The first is upwards of 70% of the adult population globally has some degree of lactose intolerance. We're the only animal that willingly seeks out the milk of other animals. So when we look at what is milk, where does this come from? What is it used for? Milk is designed to nourish baby animals, baby mammals. So human milk is designed to nourish baby humans. Cow's milk is designed to nourish baby cows. It's actually more rare that we have humans who have adapted over time, or a genetic subset that has adapted over time to be able to process lactose, to process this milk beyond toddlerhood. So after the age of 2 or 3, our ability to produce lactase, that's the enzyme that digests lactose, actually goes down pretty significantly. And I'm flashing back to my college courses that looked specifically at the mechanisms of when you eat dairy, it turns on a certain gene that produces the lactase enzyme. And it's this idea of, if we're continuously eating dairy and you become more adapted to producing the lactase enzyme, so theoretically you're able to digest it longer. But I also think that we have normalized feeling not so great after we eat certain foods. I meet a lot of people who say like, well, yeah, I am super lactose intolerant, but I still eat dairy because I just don't want to give up my ice cream, or I don't want to give up my soft cheese. Or
I was going to say, for me, it's cheese. I think I could give up milk, but I can't live without cheese. Well, I'm sure I can, but
yeah, there's different things there too. It tastes really good. It feels really good. It's creamy. We've got that little bit of sweetness. We've got that saltiness and the fattiness. And our brains, like evolutionarily, are designed to love those textures because that's the food that keeps us alive. There's also this idea that a lot of dairy products, especially cheese, is really high in a compound called casomorphines. And it is what it sounds like. It's it has a drug-like response in your body. And so when people say, oh yeah, I'm addicted to cheese, it's like, well, you might be, because you crave that feeling that your body has when you're consuming it.
That's interesting. It's kind of snowy and yucky here in New Hampshire right now. And my husband and I were just saying, oh, I just want some comfort food. And he's like, yeah, like some mac and cheese, like homemade mac and cheese. And just so what you're saying, it's like the warm, the soft, the creamy. Interesting that there's actual reasons why our body and brain are craving that.
Absolutely.
I still think it's amazing that people can give it up, because I'm not sure I've given up like sugar and soda and so many things, but I don't know, and meat, but I still I do milk and cheese and eggs and all of that. Let's talk about general nutrition for a moment. What are the most common nutritional deficiencies that we have here in America that we should be aware of? Like, what do you see most often?
So when we look at population level studies, so one of the big ones in NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, I think every few years they go out across the country and do these in-depth examinations of the average person. And we're talking all of the biometric measurements. So like, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? Let's do skin fold testing. Let's do all of these measurements to see, what does your body look like? How healthy are you? And they're also looking at what are people eating? And we build these statistical models based off of what deficiency are we seeing. The last NHANES study that we have showed upwards of 92 to 97% of Americans are fiber deficient. So a lot of times, vegetarians are asked, well, where do you get your protein? And I think the correct response is, well, where do you get your fiber? So
Absolutely.
it's worth considering. Americans on the whole, we suffer from all of these chronic diseases and cancers of the GI system, especially colon cancer. And one of the best ways to prevent colon cancer, to prevent issues like diverticulitis or chronic constipation, is to increase your fiber intake. And you only get fiber from plants.
Mm-hmm. And I know the non-plant-based people are probably thinking, I could just have Metamucil or something like that, one of those fiber supplements. Is that similar? Or I would assume we're better with the natural, but do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. So whenever possible, and this does reflect my training, it also reflects how I counsel folks and my own beliefs. I much prefer folks get their nutrition from real food. I love that we have all of these supplements. It's something that is really helpful, but I look at this as a tool in the toolbox. If we're using that analogy, when you look at your toolbox, everyone's got a hammer, everyone's got a screwdriver, but you kind of know, like, you don't always need the screwdriver, sometimes need the hammer, or sometimes need the specialty tool. So I look at these supplements as one tool that we potentially have in the toolbox, and that can be really helpful. But in a perfect world, if I can wave the magic wand, I'm going to say, let's look at how can we add maybe some whole grains. The science says that that's one of our untapped resources. If we can just switch from refined grains to whole grains. So like white bread to wheat bread, or instead of super sugary breakfast cereal, we're switching to oatmeal. If we can add in more fruits, more vegetables, even adding in some of these meat replacements, we're still getting your protein and you're getting some fiber in there too. So there's lots of different opportunities where we can add plant-based foods to your standard diet without having to rely on some of these supplements that even like Metamucil or we say psyllium husk, something that we have to consider. Like, you have to really focus on your hydration. If you're taking these fiber supplements, we have to think about, okay, are you taking any medications, and when are you taking these medications or other supplements? Because that fiber can actually bind some of those medications so that you're not getting the benefit of taking them. So
now, is that just when it's a synthetic kind of thing? Like, would that happen if we're eating, I'm eating my oatmeal with my medicine, or they're both in my stomach at the same time? Does that cause issues as well, or is it more when it's synthetic?
So it just depends on what the medication is and what it is that we're eating. But I think with the fiber supplements, it's more so that fiber is something that your body does not absorb, but it really nourishes that microbiome in the large intestine. So it's designed to pass through that small intestine. Once it hits that large intestine, it's really nourishing that microbiome. And it's also going to draw water into your large intestine. And so that's part of why I say, okay, we gotta pay attention to your hydration at the same time if you are taking these things, just because it's going to draw water in. But if you're taking any kind of medication, or if you have other things in your stomach at the same time that you're taking the fiber supplements, it's very possible that it's just going to kind of like lock up and be bound within that fiber structure. And so because your small intestine can't absorb any of that nutrition or any of that mass, it's just going to pass through undigested and unabsorbed.
Gotcha. In this region of the world where I am, we have a lot of vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah.
D and omega-3 is very, very common up here. What would be easy ways that our listeners could meet some of those deficiencies, like naturally?
Yeah. Absolutely. So when I look at things like vitamin D and omega-3s, I don't hate a supplement for these items because they're relatively cheap. They're pretty accessible. So most people in North America are either vitamin D deficient or they don't have optimal vitamin D. And I say this too with the athletes that I work with who are like out and about in the sunshine a lot. I still see vitamin D deficiency with them. And so there's some things that we can do. We can look at fortified products. That might be, if you are still a milk drinker, look for the milk that has vitamin D in it. If you're a plant-based milk drinker, we can find non-dairy milks that have added vitamin D. We can also look at certain kinds of mushrooms. When certain mushrooms are exposed to UV light, they actually produce vitamin D.
Oh
So
boy. My husband's going to love that you just said that because I will not eat mushrooms. I've been following a vegetarian diet for a little over 5 years and I've like had little bits of them chopped up and stuff, but like give me a big hunk and like some people will eat it like a steak. Can't do it. Can't do it.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's hilarious that's so good for us. Oh,
it's
well.
an option. You might not like that option, but it's an option.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, some people really love mushrooms. I don't know. I'm still that little kid, like, I don't want to eat that.
It's so common. It's oftentimes
Hmm.
a texture
That's
thing.
exactly what it is
Yeah.
for me.
It is also possible. I do see sometimes that some people are sensitive to fungi where their body just doesn't feel good after they eat it. And I'm a big proponent of you have to make the choice that's right for you. And if eating mushrooms isn't right for you, then don't do it. If you don't love it, don't eat it.
Okay. And so, how about those omega 3s? How are we going to get those?
Yeah. So a lot of folks tend to associate omega 3s with fish. So what I will often tell people is, those fish aren't producing those omega 3s on their own. Those fish are actually typically getting the omega 3s from eating algae. So if we're looking at a supplement that's going to be appropriate for vegetarians, for vegans, for people who don't tolerate fish for any reason, I actually look to an algae-based omega-3 supplement. And ideally, we're looking for EPA or DHA specifically. So if we're looking at supplementing, I say DHA is for structure, EPA is for function. So especially for folks who maybe struggle with depression, anxiety, or ADHD, there's a lot of benefits to supplementing with EPA. That being said, we can get plenty of omega 3s in our diet from things like walnuts, chia seed, or ground flaxseed. If we're looking more specifically at DHA, EPA, we can convert those omega 3s into those substances, but sometimes it's just not super duper efficient. So we might look at, can we get some kind of high omega 3 like nut or seed several times throughout the day? Or, like I said, I don't hate a supplement for that.
Perfect. Can you talk about some of the overall general benefits of plant based eating?
Yeah. People who tend to eat more plant-based foods, whether or not they're fully plant-based or fully vegan, we're meeting our fiber recommendations. It is very possible to meet your protein requirements on a plant-based diet. We just have to be intentional about the foods that we're eating. And oftentimes when we're looking at if we're eating this healthful plant-based diet, we're getting an abundance of all of these phytonutrients. So think of all of these chemicals that plants are producing that our bodies don't technically need, but they do so well with these compounds, these nutrients. So we are looking at things like decreased levels of inflammation in the body, an increase in antioxidants that's very protective against these chronic health conditions, especially cancer. We're looking at these compounds that are cardioprotective, that help keep our blood vessels and our hearts working as to their best ability. So really, when we're eating more plants, we're seeing this overall boost in well-being and an overall boost in, like I said, giving our bodies the best opportunity to feel good.
Perfect. And we've talked about this recently on an episode where we're talking about the benefit of like growing your own sprouts. What's your take on that?
So my take on sprouts is, first and foremost, make sure that you're getting your seeds from a reputable source. When we're looking at food safety, this is one area where a whole food plant-based diet, or just generally a plant-based diet, has an advantage over an omnivorous diet, a diet that includes, okay, if you're preparing raw meat, you know that you have to be more careful with those surfaces because we might have some kind of bacterial contamination from that raw meat. Sprouts, unfortunately, is one of these areas where vegetarians do have to be careful, or plant-based folks do have to be careful to make sure that they're getting their sprouts from a reputable source, because the conditions in which those sprouts are grown is also ideal for pathogenic bacteria, that bacteria that can do harm. Many years ago, and this came up in my dietetics training, we were talking about food safety and talking about an outbreak of a very severe form of E. coli, and was tied to sprouts.
Like sprouts that someone got from the grocery store.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think as part of a well-rounded diet, sure, if you're going to grow your own, I love that for you. We have so many different vitamins, minerals, those phytochemicals, those phytonutrients that we can get from sprouts. But again, just make sure that you trust the supplier, that these have been grown ideally in a way that it's safe.
Yeah, gotcha. So let's talk about some of these athletes that you work with. And actually, before we do that, I know you just did like a giant, I don't know, triathlon race, something outrageous. Tell us about that, and then talk a little bit about how you help athletes take care of their bodies and their nutrition while they're training for some of these events.
Yeah. So I recently did my first Ironman, which is 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and in a marathon, 26.2-mile run.
Holy moly.
I know.
Good job.
I have to pinch myself sometimes too. Wow, I really just did that. That was a really long day. And it was something that really I had been working toward for the last 15 years. 15 years ago was the first time that I said out loud, hey, I want to do this someday. I started out my athletic career in my mid-20s as a charity runner. So I did my first half marathon while raising money for a foundation. And I absolutely fell in love with endurance sports. And that was another piece of me becoming vegan, of moving to this 100% plant-based diet, because I had seen, so not just that science around chronic disease, but all of these super ultra athletes that just pursue these incredible feats, and they do it while they're vegan. And they say that when I went vegan is when I saw the most gains in my athletic career. So for me, going from a half marathon to taking advice from one of the top ultra marathoners in the world, I thought, oh yeah, of course, that totally makes sense for me. But realistically, yeah, that was part of that decision for me. So I've done 8 marathons since I started running. I've had 2 full-term pregnancies, which a lot of women will tell you that feels like its own endurance event. And the science kind of supports that too. So, I've been able to do all of these big endurance things. And when we look at how did I fuel those things? How did I provide for that nutrition, for building strength and for recovering well? We do see that, yeah, it is absolutely possible to train for these big events that puts a really high demand on your cardiovascular system. And then to eat a fully plant-based diet on top of that actually does support a lot of that cardiovascular health and adaptation. So we look at, okay, what happens in a non-athlete who's struggling with their cardiovascular system? What are those recommendations that we're making in terms of their nutrition to help them feel better, to improve those markers? And oftentimes we're looking at, yeah, can we bring in more plants? Can we bring in more plant-based foods? And so when we look at it from that perspective of, okay, we're increasing blood flow, we're reducing vascular resistance, we're looking at how your body is repairing itself with some of these antioxidants as well. So oxidative stress, oxidative damage does go along with endurance training. And how can we mitigate that damage? It's plant-based foods. We do have to be more mindful about, that we're eating regularly, that we are providing for our protein. I know vegans hate it when they're like, oh man, like the protein question again. But we do have to be mindful of it, just making sure that we're getting protein with every meal, with every snack, and utilizing different sources. So we're not just eating tofu all day, every day, that we're getting these really good whole grains, that we're using our nuts and seeds, especially those nuts and seeds that are high in omega-3s or high in magnesium and zinc and iron. All of these really great foods that support our healthy bodily processes already, but are especially important when we're asking so much of our bodies, of training upwards of, we might start at 5 hours a week. And by the time we get to our peak season, especially for Ironman triathletes, we're talking 15 to 20 hours a week of training. That's a lot of exercise. That's a lot that we're asking of our bodies. And so we really do have to make sure that we're fueling appropriately to get there.
Yeah. And in comparison to like training for that a marathon type situation, what can we do if we're going through a stressful situation? Because I have a feeling there might be some similarities there. But if you're going through a stressful situation in your life, is there extra nutrition that would help with that? Maybe help with the stress hormones or something? Because I know a lot of our listeners, life has its ups and downs and we want to support them.
Absolutely. The way that I approach my nutrition counseling is always from this place of compassion. So, first and foremost, I would say, give yourself grace. Extend the same compassion toward yourself that you would toward your best friend. So when you're going through a stressful time and that first instinct is, I'm going to reach for some chocolate or I'm going to reach for that mac and cheese, give yourself the grace around it to recognize that, yeah, this food does bring me comfort. I think it's not helpful when we reach for these foods that bring us comfort and our immediate response is to say something unkind about ourselves.
Yeah, good point.
So first and foremost, try to let that go or try to offer yourself some grace and compassion. The next thing that I would advise is let's look at quality over quantity. So again, if we're reaching for these foods that make us feel good, these comfort foods, then can we be really, again, I keep using this word intentional, but yes, can we be intentional? Can we look at, I'm going to make this food that feels good and I'm going to pour so much love and high quality ingredients into it as much as possible and sit down and really savor it.
And pay attention to it instead of watching TV or something, like
Yes.
being mindful. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Are there any foods we should maybe think about adding when we're going through a stressful situation that might help?
Let's look at pairing that with our really fantastic fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Especially those omega-3s, those are really fantastic for promoting that EPA. And we do see that higher levels of omega-3s and higher levels of EPA are associated with lower levels of depression and anxiety. And so if this is a really stressful time in your life that you're going through, you may benefit from added omega-3s. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But either way, these are nutrients that your body needs. Your body cannot make omega-3s. It can make EPA and DHA from omega-3s, but it's called an essential fatty acid because your body cannot convert other fatty acids into these omega-3s. So I think that that's something that we can pay attention to and we can add. Leafy greens are another really great source of nutrition. So there's a little bit of omega-3s in things like kale or other dark leafy greens. They're also going to have a lot of those phytochemicals that just generally support your health. And then we're also looking at minerals such as zinc, magnesium, iron, calcium, especially in foods like collard greens or kale. So adding those in addition to our high quality comfort foods, making sure that we are absolutely paying attention to adding in our fruits and vegetables. And I think it's also worth noting that, we actually have 3 nervous systems in our body. So we have the sympathetic, which is fight or flight response. We have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our calming nervous system, our regulating nervous system. And then we also have the enteric nervous system, which is located in your gut. And so if any one of those nervous systems becomes dysregulated, you're not going to feel good. So if we can pay attention to your gut health, pay attention to, can we get enough fiber in your diet? Can we get enough of these fruits and vegetables? Then that will help your body cope with any other stress that your sympathetic nervous system is dealing with.
What would you say is the biggest myth you'd like to bust about plant-based nutrition or nutrition in general? Either one. What's the biggest myth?
Oh, there's so many.
What's your favorite myth?
It's funny. So last April, I went out to California. I ran the Big Sur Marathon, which was like this bucket list marathon for me. And I'm hanging out in the expo. I was waiting for my partner, and I happened to be wearing a t-shirt that said something about being vegan. And this guy comes up to me. He's like, wait, so you're a vegan and you're doing the race, but how do your bones not fall apart? Like, how do you? So I think there's this myth of like vegans are so weak and we have brittle bones, and this idea that, somehow our dietary choices make us less than. But the reality is, as long as we're planning out our diet well, that we're getting enough calories and we're focusing on strength training and timing our nutrition around our workouts, it is absolutely possible to have strong muscles and strong bones and to have this vitality and this endurance and live a good, healthy life.
Well said. What are the different ways that our friends listening could work with you?
I am limited in terms of the states that I can work with folks in, and that just has to do with the work that I do with medical nutrition therapy. So if folks are in Colorado, California, Arizona, Michigan, New Jersey, Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, or Minnesota, those are the states that I'm allowed to practice in. I practice virtually, which means that I work with folks over telehealth. You can find me at my website, plantforwardendurancenutrition.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Plant Forward Endurance Nutrition as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. This was fun.